This video is brought to you by MUBI, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/Yarzade. The romantic comedy is not now, nor has it ever been, concerned much with realism. It's a genre of fantasy, one where love really does conquer all and wishes are granted. It's a genre where former lovers get a second chance to do it right, where kissing in the rain is romantic and not just a cold, wet disaster. But more than enduring love, the romantic comedy is also a fantasy of economic stability and financial gain. In the expansive rom-com genre, the money is just as important as the romance. For clarity's sake, let's take a moment to really narrow down what I'm qualifying as a romantic comedy. There are buddy comedies, raunchy comedies, where the development of a romantic relationship is a subplot. You could take the love story away and still have a cohesive movie, not a rom-com. In a movie like Swingers, romance is certainly an element. The main character is trying to get over a breakup, but it's not about falling in love so much as it is about falling out of it, not a rom-com. My Best Friend's Wedding, despite its unconventional plot, is a rom-com, but something like Employee of the Month, which is more com than rom, isn't. If you go on a romantic comedy binge, it wouldn't take long to notice that these films most often focus on characters who have money. It's nothing for them to get floor seats to a major sports game. They can fly off to a destination wedding at a moment's notice. They live in these ridiculously good-looking homes with amazing sweater collections, and if they're having a hard time, they can do a home exchange with a complete stranger. Side note, The Holiday is a perfect movie. Everyone thinks that the allure of the rom-com, the fantasy it provides, is one where love really is that simple. But it doesn't stop there. The fantasy of the rom-com is unbridled freedom. That kind of freedom is possible with a certain level of income. Since the dawn of the romantic comedy, the careers of its main characters have been just as important as their coupling with a love interest. It would be simple enough to claim that this genre doesn't believe people who work minimum wage jobs are worthy of experiencing an escapist kind of love story. But the moral of these movies seem to more deeply align with the juxtaposition between an idea of success versus an actual success. By that I mean, there's a large appeal to creating money can't buy me love storylines. In a story like The Family Man, for example, the protagonist, a highly successful Wall Street executive, is sent to live in an alternate dimension where he never left his girlfriend Kate. While he's completely baffled by this world at first, he grows to love it and realizes that he was never that happy. Although his life as a Wall Street executive was lavish, it was also lonely. This trope is also rampant in Hallmark holiday movies where big city working woman has to go back home to her small town where she falls in love with a local baker / carpenter / organic food shop owner, and she chooses to leave her big city life behind to live humbly with her new partner. The irony of this kind of framing is that it posits the idea that money isn't everything, while mainly depicting stories where money has solved most of the protagonist's problems. It's easier to be swept up in romance when you don't have to get up at 4 a.m. to punch into your warehouse job. First dates can be magical and exorbitant when you make more than $30,000 annually. Love is more important than money, these movies seem to say. But also, if you want to fall in love, you should probably have money. It's not to say that these movies focus largely on the extremely wealthy, but these characters are, at the very least, comfortable enough, for example, to quit the job they're losing interest in, which is a frequent subplot. In Brown Sugar, Taye Diggs plays Dre, an A&R who works on signing new talent to Millennium Records. Dre grows disillusioned with the kind of artist his label wants to sign and their unwillingness to take risks on exciting artists. Encouraged by his childhood best friend and eventual love interest, Sydney, she's just been promoted to editor-in-chief of XXL. Dre decides to leave his job and start his own label, something that he's able to do because he has enough savings to not only invest in a new company, but to maintain a living while he waits for it to take off. A romance comedy with a focus on a working-class couple might include a plotline where our lead, a mechanic, dreams of owning his own company, but quitting his job to work on that is easier said than done, especially if he's living paycheck to paycheck. It's important to note that Brown Sugar is a romantic comedy starring 2 black leads. Black stories on screen tend to skew towards tales of the middle class or wealthy, but it's a little different from white-led stories with the same financial background. Black storytellers have felt a responsibility to depict Black characters as something other than down and out. When we look back at Black representation throughout film and television history, we find numerous depictions of Black people in poverty or in stories focused on trauma porn. The Cosby Show was as big a deal as it was because it was a sitcom about a successful middle-class Black family. Later, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air would do the same, but Fresh Prince also had the distinction of creating a contrast between Will's working-class background in West Philly and the bourgeois experiences of his extended relatives in Bel-Air. Fresh Prince would also continuously highlight this class disparity in tandem with respectability politics, even as early as the first episode. The Best Man, a movie I just adore because everybody is so messy, is an example of how important depictions of success are in films coming out of Black Hollywood. In The Best Man, college friends reunite for a wedding, and pretty much everyone is doing well for themselves. Harper is a published author whose book is expected to do extremely well. Jordan is a television executive. Lance is a famous quarterback. There are characters who have less going for them, like Quentin, but Quentin's career, or lack thereof, as much as it's criticized, isn't deemed to be a failure of skill. Quentin is just not interested in having a traditional job. As far as these depictions go, there's a specific reason why these Black-led rom-coms focus so much on success. There's a historical bigotry they're trying to overcome, where other films with a similar framing are just designed that way. While it's rare to see romantic comedies focusing on a working-class couple coming together, it's not so rare to see working-class characters in rom-coms, especially when the conflict in these films focuses on a class divide. Class divide romances are incredibly popular. In films like these, our protagonist may be a service worker who happens to catch the eye of someone with, excuse my language, fuck you money. Even though there's a bit of a struggle and some reluctance due to feeling like they don't fit into each other's worlds, they ultimately find happiness, and love, of course, conquers all. In these stories, the real romance, the real fantasy, is the chance at upward mobility. When Jennifer Lopez falls for Ralph Fiennes in Made in Manhattan, loving him is literally life-changing, as it gives her an entryway into high society. Made in Manhattan does try to ensure the lead character has her own power, though. Every one of her co-workers has told her that she would be great for a management position, and by the end of the film, not only does she get that promotion, but she uses her position to make sure her co-workers get promoted to management as well. Class divide romances, whether com or not, are tales as old as time. From Boys Over Flowers to Sabrina, these romances have an appeal like no other. With their roots deep in the fairy tales of yesteryear, these stories speak to a universal desire for a better life and financial security. Love gets to be the answer to loneliness and the antidote to poverty. It wasn't that long ago that this was an indisputable fact. Some may even call it a truth universally acknowledged. During the Regency era, of which time Jane Austen penned her most famous works, marriage was not a romantic choice based on love. It was an economic decision and a means of survival. Austen's novels double as love stories and as a riveting reflection of the limitations put on women during this period. In Sense and Sensibility, two sisters are left to survive on limited income after their father passes away. The possibility of marriage, especially one to a man with a consistent income, presents hope. In Pride and Prejudice, a story following the Bennet family, the matriarch, Mrs. Bennet, makes it her life mission to get all 5 of her daughters married to secure their future. Elizabeth, the most reluctant of the daughters, stands out in her reasoning for seeking marriage. She doesn't want to have it if it only means securing her future. She wants to fall in love. Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's best friend, doesn't share those views. As much as love would be nice to marry for, she'd rather marry someone first and worry about falling in love with them later. After all, survival is more important than love.
Not all of us can afford to be romantic. I've been offered a comfortable home and protection.
Despite having been published over 200 years ago, Austen's work is still a newer addition to the pantheon of tales about upward mobility via marriage. The story of Rhodopus from ancient Greek is considered by many to be one of the earliest versions of what would eventually come to be known as Cinderella. Later iterations of this trope would see a slight minimization of the wealth gap between the two lovers. Instead of a slave marrying a king, for instance, we might see, perhaps, the whirlwind romance between an American reporter and a European princess. A Jersey kid living in Reseda with his hostess mom falling for a girl whose parents own a country club. Or a donkey falling for a dragon. The effects of escapism in this trope is tenfold what we get out of rom-coms without this class divide. It presents an opportunity that many people grinding at dead-end jobs day in and day out may fantasize about, being taken away from the difficulty. When we do see stories about working class people falling in love, very rarely do we see it play out with the traditional rom-com formula. The world they inhabit isn't as colorful or as funny. In fact, a lot of these romances seem to be reserved for grittier and darker dramas with a penchant for realism. Some have happy endings, some don't. John Singleton's Poetic Justice cannot be mistaken for a rom-com. It starts with the main character, Justice, watching her boyfriend get gunned down. Her journey of eventually opening her heart up to love again is overshadowed by grief and disillusionment with her environment. Her love interest, Lucky, takes his daughter from her mother after discovering a crack pipe in her home. He later has to deal with the fallout of losing his beloved cousin to a senseless and violent crime. The world they live in doesn't offer a means of escape, and the love they eventually develop for each other is not untouched by the fear that it could all be taken away at any moment. In Miranaire's Mississippi Masala, Mina and her family settle in Greenwood, Mississippi, after being forced from their home following the decree of dictator Idi Amin. Mina falls for Demetrius, a local carpet cleaner who makes a modest living working for himself. The two of them try to keep their love for each other secret, as neither of their families would approve of their union. They face bigotry from all sides, and just when you think they're about to fold under the pressure, the two of them run away together and find happiness away from their family's disapproval. Other romance dramas following these couples don't end on such a hopeful note. While we're on the topic of romantic dramas, I must acknowledge another caveat to on-screen depictions of working-class romance. When movies have two lower-class people falling in love, they're probably criminals. In the movie Cinnamon, a surprisingly competent Tubi original from director Brian Keith Montgomery Jr., Jody, a gas station clerk, falls for Eddie, a pickpocketer. They forge a plan to rob the gas station Jody works at to make a better life for themselves in California. True Romance follows Clarence, a comic book store clerk, and Alabama, the woman he eventually falls for. Alabama is a call girl who barely gets to keep the money she makes, as it all goes to her pimp, Drexel. Clarence decides to kill Drexel to free Alabama, and they end up going on the run. A possible reason for the few romantic comedies with working class leads is this idea that working class people can't be happy. The reason shows like Malcolm in the Middle and Everybody Hates Chris have the dedicated cult following that they do is because these two sitcoms tell the stories of working class families where they are not defined by whatever struggles they may experience. Good Times will always be known as the first sitcom to focus on a working class family, but even Good Times had tragedy woven into storylines frequently. Everybody Hates Chris had a distinct viewpoint. Sometimes being broke is funny.
And instead of Oreos, Ginger Snaps, or Chips Ahoy, we got
Cookie?
Movies like F. Gary Gray's Friday and more recently Sarita Singleton's One of Them Days are able to show working class people experiencing a level of joy, being able to laugh even though their financial circumstances are less than ideal.
You got to be a stupid motherfucker to get fired on your day off.
It's possible for comedies to focus on characters living with minimum income without becoming preachy poverty porn. So, is it possible for a romantic comedy to do the same without losing that integral element of escapism? Definitely. And it's not like we haven't seen it done before. City Lights is one of the earliest rom-coms focusing on two people from poor backgrounds. Tramp, the infamous Charlie Chaplin character, falls for a blind woman selling flowers on the street. Through a series of absurdist events and mistaken identities, Tramp falls for her and does everything he can to help her when she gets sick, even getting a job as a street sweeper. Tramp is a character who is always down on his luck, a perpetual vagrant. But when he sees an eviction notice, he makes it his mission to do whatever he can to pay her rent. The 1998 film The Wedding Singer is, to date, the most well-known example of a working-class rom-com. Robbie Hart works as a wedding singer, making minimum wage. He has aspirations of becoming a professional songwriter, but in the meantime, he gives the occasional singing lesson to members of his community, one of whom can only pay him in meatballs. And he lives in his sister's basement. When the movie starts, he's about to wed his longtime girlfriend, Linda, but she stands him up at the altar. When they have the official breakup talk, we learn that Linda is leaving him due in large part to his job, and therefore lack of money.
The point is, I woke up this morning and I realized I'm about to marry a wedding singer? I am never gonna leave Richfield.
It's the perfect place to raise a family.
Oh, yeah. Living in your sister's basement with 5 kids while you're off every weekend doing wedding gigs at a whopping $60 a pop?
We see how this affects Robbie over the course of the film, especially when he falls for Julia, a waitress engaged to a Wall Street yuppie named Glenn. Robbie sabotages his friendship with Julia when he projects Linda's words onto her.
You're into material shit.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? You're marrying Glenn because he's got money.
Then when Robbie has the opportunity to tell Julia how he feels about her, he stops himself, believing that there's not much he can offer her with his limited income as a wedding singer. And why would she want to live with him in his sister's basement when she can live in a penthouse in New York? Part of the triumph in The Wedding Singer with these two coming together is Robbie getting over his previous experiences being in a relationship with someone who didn't think he made enough money. Robbie, for the first time since getting dumped, doesn't see himself as less deserving of love because of his financial standing. Despite the minimum wage income of Robbie and Julia, The Wedding Singer still manages to offer that escapist fantasy. We still have a big flight stopping or flight hopping moment. Robbie even gets help from Billy Idol, who later asks him to write a song for him. And all of it happens for a wedding singer and a waitress. I could see the argument being made that it's hard to romanticize something that puts such a strain on romantic relationships, but rom-coms romanticize relationship killers all the time. An entire video could be done dissecting the normalization of cheating in romantic comedies. Sometimes physical cheating is meant to be romantic, but what's more common is finding emotional infidelity being excused because, again, love conquers all, even if you're already with someone else. From Pam and Jim in The Office to Jonathan and Sarah in Serendipity, I just wax poetic about The Wedding Singer, but not even that one is absolved of this trope. Many researchers have found that unhealthy relationship characteristics are sometimes normalized or even romanticized in romance films. So why stop at money? I'm not the first person to note this tendency to mainly depict middle to upper class love stories in rom-coms. 7 years ago, Hugh Armitage wrote a piece for Digital Spy, talking about the genre's predisposition toward wealthy characters. We are not saying that these are bad films. Indeed, many are diverse in ways rarely or never seen before, and are hugely entertaining to boot. Nor are we saying that all rom-coms must be about hard-working single parents and 20-somethings struggling to pay off their student debt. But with a reported 40 million US citizens living in poverty and a UK poverty rate calculated at nearly a quarter of the population, a bit of balance wouldn't go amiss when it comes to telling the romantic tales of people who aren't rolling in it. Otherwise, the unspoken implication is that romance belongs only to the wealthy suburbanites. Anyone on minimum wage, or even a modest salary, can't get a look in. MUBI is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. With MUBI, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. Picture it. It's the height of the coronavirus pandemic, and you are an actor. Few productions are active, the theaters are closed, and you're feeling as though the well has run dry. With nothing on the horizon and the uncomfortable thought that you have no choice but to walk away from your passion, what do you do? Well, if you're Sam Crane, who co-directed this project with documentary filmmaker Penny Grills, you play Grand Theft Auto with your good friend Mark Oosterveen. In the midst of random carjackings and shootouts, you find an outdoor amphitheater, and you think, we could probably do some acting here. Grand Theft Hamlet is about what happens when you put on a production of Shakespeare in the unpredictable and violent world of Grand Theft Auto. Shot entirely within the world of the game, the result is a film that is hilarious, awkward, and tender in all the right places. You'll laugh, you'll feel inspired, and more importantly, you'll appreciate the power of art and collaboration. Grand Theft Hamlet will be streaming on MUBI on February 21st, so mark your calendars and please take advantage of this offer. You can try MUBI free for 30 days at mubi.com/Yarazaid. That's mubi.com/Yarazaid for a whole month of great cinema for free.